Bitcoin is dead. Long live cybercurrencies. This is the sequel that we did during the IMF week in Washington, D.C. in October. It was a tremendous outcome, debating whether Bitcoin is the future or is it not. I would please like to welcome our lead panelists, starting with the trust is the issue. Alexander, please join the panel. An applause to Alexander coming all the way.
Place it somewhere.
Fiat is a fraud. Countries should no longer exist as they are today. Please welcome Jeffrey from New York. In order to have a coexisting in our world, we need a collaboration, and the right policy is key. From the IMF, from the Swiss National Bank and Bank of International Settlement, Danny from Washington, D.C., please. Now here comes about the real money. Money management, making the money, $20 billion under management, exclusive in currencies. Fiat will prevail. The governments will have an existence in the future. Please welcome Michael from London. Please, thank you so much, everybody, to come. We have a packed house. We have people standing and freezing outside. We try to warm up everybody, even outside, with a very emotional but a rational debate. Everything is allowed except personal attacks and physical attacks. It is an audience participation debate for the first half hour. It is on the panel exclusively, and then we open up the floor. Please cook up your emotions and irrational arguments and questions, no statements. We do not accept statements. We accept only questions to the panel after I open the floor. It is an Oxford-style debate. That means that we have a question at the beginning, and you vote. You vote. We are a democratic process. And the question we will count, and the question will be repeated at the end of the panel, and to check whether the panel can convince you in one or the other direction. We talk about the future of currency and our lives. The question is, please silence. We do a collective, then a vote. Please help me collectively. The question is, Bitcoin, will it be the leading global borderless currency in 10 years' time? Yes, hands in the air. 1. I repeat the question. Bitcoin, will it be the leading global borderless currency in 10 years' time? Who thinks that is true? Hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Give me more. 9, 10. Jeffrey, where is your hand? Oh, you're right. Oh, so okay, up the hands again, and we collectively count. So that seems to me is around, how do we agree? That's 5%. 10%. Let's make it 10% believe that Bitcoin will be the leading global borderless currency in the world. 10% is the number. Let's see the panel whether they can convince you to up the 10% going towards the 50%.
Who votes?
Who votes, Alexander?
Who votes
against that
there
the
might
Bitcoin
be
will
lots
be...
of Swiss around here, but typically we don't vote.
Who thinks that Bitcoin will not be the leading global borderless currency in the world? Hands up. Oi. No, that's the opposite. 90. So 9 to 1. 9 to 1. 9 to 1, that's the number. Let's see whether we can sway the whole thing in the other direction. The structure of the debate is the following. Each panelist will make an opening statement. Please silence in the back. Will make an opening statement, which will be followed by a series of arguments and challenges towards the other panelists. No phone calls in here now, please. And then we will open the floor when we exhaust the arguments and the emotions to the floor, and then we will crank it up. And then we have a final vote. I would like to please start with Alexander with the opening statement.
Okay, my opening statement has been a bit modified by the question, but my opening statement was about trust, and my question was, isn't Bitcoin a wonderful thing because it doesn't need a trusted intermediary? And my answer to that will give you my answer to the question that was posed to you. And I thought, okay, I think you have a little representation there. I just scribbled that a moment ago. And you have the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's a tour de force. It's a wonderful thing. And it's a distributed ledger system. The transactions are entered only after they are verified. They are verified by a process that also by the miners, and that also generates the supply of bitcoins, which is limited to 21 million, which it will reach asymptotically around 2040. And all that is built into the system. And you'll notice that people only talk to each other in the system. And so there is no trusted intermediary. It's a great system. It's a fail-safe system. It has a couple of problems. And the one problem is, well, let me take the first problem, which is this works when Bitcoin has a large area for transactions. And once you add new nodes, okay, new participants in the Bitcoin system, it starts having problems. There is a scalability issue, okay? As more and more nodes enter, as more and more people start to use the system and transact, the transactions costs go up and the speed of transactions goes down. On top of it, it costs a lot of electricity and ecological system and so on. That's another question. But from the user's points of view, the system is being to sort of puff at the edges, okay? As more and more transactions take place, especially when more and more people transact Bitcoin as a speculative investment, you would say. And that, in a way, the system it doesn't work that way. Then it has a second problem, okay? The second problem is that unless everybody transacts in Bitcoins, unless I can pay all my suppliers in Bitcoin and get Bitcoins, I have at some point to go into real money. And there are all sorts of things that get into the ecosystem. The ecosystem is no longer a closed system. You have the exchanges, which change money changes that change Bitcoin and other currencies and so on. You have the wallet providers who make it easier for you to access the system. You have the mining pools that use some of the nodes in the system to mine the Bitcoins, to get the supply going, get the rewards and increase the supply. You have the mixers who make it more difficult to pierce the anonymity of the system so you can keep your anonymity better. You have all sorts of other services. You have vaults and so on. So is that still a trust? No, the question is, would you trust that system better than some other systems? Why would you trust a system where, in fact, there are lots of points at which you have intermediaries? You need intermediaries. You need exchanges, wallets, etc., etc. Those are partly unregulated. Those are partly easily subject to fraud and to scams and so on. I, for one, would not trust Bitcoin more than my bank. Now, maybe I would be tempted to go to Bitcoin because my bank, obviously, as a retail customer, charges me far too much. But that doesn't mean that I would trust Bitcoin. I may be tempted to try a little bit of transacting, but I'll soon find out that I do not have any safety about the price of Bitcoin that fluctuates all over the place. So I would not think, I think anyway, Bitcoin is not a currency. It is borderless to some extent, but it will be regulated out of borderlessness by others. So my answer to your question is no.
No. So, fine. Thank you. Jeffrey from New York.
Well, first, I'd like to sort of think that was a very good explanation on Bitcoin and the ecosystem. So I don't have to talk about that anymore because you did a very good job. With respect to, you talked about trust. Well, I'll assert that nobody trusts a bank. Nobody, okay? That's why every government has deposit insurance, because at the end of the day, nobody trusts the bank. And that's why even deposit insurance is not sufficient. That's why everybody also looks for central banks to have lenders of last resort. So forget about people trusting banks. 0 people trust banks. If you stripped banks out of deposit insurance, if you stripped them out of the lender of last resort, okay, and then you had this ecosystem being created, I could tell you this, I believe more people would put money into this ecosystem than a bank. So when you have to talk about a bank, you have to talk about the whole ecosystem that supports a bank. And when you talk about where you put your money, okay, so you put your money in, I'll give the example of the United States being an American, and that's my perspective. First, you have to go out and say, you have to think about what the institution of the money system is that we have today, the fiat regime. One is, right now, every government says we need to have more inflation. Almost every government says we need to promote inflation. So that means every government that prints money, immediately they convey that money to you. They're trying to make it worth less than the moment they convey it to you. So think about a business model that says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sell this to you, but as soon as I convey ownership to you, I'm trying to make it, I'm actively working to make it worth less than what I conveyed it to you at that moment. I think nobody in the private sector would succeed with a business model like that. Okay? So, and then like in the US, we have these economic statistics. Well, right in around 2000, they moved economic statistics into what they call hedonics. So they used to have a measure where they would sit back and say, 1980, they took a look at your basket and they calculated inflation. When Reagan was president, and I was part of the transition effort, they sat around, Greenspan and a whole bunch of people, and said, let's come up with an inflation number that comes up with the lowest number for inflation. And that became the new statistic. They didn't sit around saying, what's the best way to measure inflation? They said, what's the measure that'll come out with the lowest inflation rate? And that became the new inflation statistic, okay? 1990, they sit back and say, the economy's not growing well, so we need a better inflation statistic that further lowers the number of inflation, so we make GDP growth look better, okay? And then 2000, they say, well, the economy's not growing like stuff, so let's talk about this. You know what? Really a lot of these things go up, but they're not going up because there's inflation. They're going up because the quality is improving a lot. So let's figure out how do we come up with the fudge number for quality improvements. So there's a site called Shadow Stats. Okay, Shadow Stats measures what would inflation look like today if we used 1980 numbers. Okay, right now inflation, if we use the 1980 way of measuring inflation, inflation's almost 10% today. Okay, if we use 1990 numbers, this is in the US, if we use 1990 numbers, inflation's about 5% today. So think about them as they say, you want to put your money in the bank and you trust it, okay? So think about this model. You give the bank money. Okay, what are you earning on your money? Is anybody earning 3 or 4% on the model? So my business model is, you know what, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get a whole bunch of government money to support me. I'm going to take your money, and I'm going to hold it for you. And a year later, your purchasing power, your money is less than the day you gave it to me. And that's a system that you say you trust. So that's a garbage system.
So Jeffrey,
right now, the only thing that you could own where your purchasing power of your money, where you have more higher purchasing power today than you had a year ago, is Bitcoin. So that's what I trust. I trust holding something that time in the future, I'll be able to buy more than I can buy today.
So Jeffrey, trust the Bitcoin, distrust the government.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you. Danny.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Caspar. It's great to be here, and it's a big crowd. That's awesome. So, in the jobs that I had, I always had to read a lot. So every day I would read a couple of papers, so maybe more than 1,000 papers in my life. And when I read the white paper on Bitcoin by Satoshi about a couple of years ago, I thought this was really awesome. I had a wow effect. I read through it. It was well written, easily to understand, and it really solved a problem that no one had solved before. And it said it's an electronic peer-to-peer payment system. And they created really a great solution. And if you now look back 9 years, I think it has been nothing but remarkable. All the coins are valued at $600 billion. That's slightly less than Apple, but it took Apple much longer to get there. So I think it's an amazing success story. But now what we also see is Bitcoin was designed to be a peer-to-peer payment system, but it's not used that way. It's used sometimes, but this is not the market where it has grown. So we have to think about what happened here. You know, it's supposed to be a payment system, peer-to-peer, without banks and so on, but people are not using it this way. People buy Bitcoin to hold it because they think it's a good investment, like you said. You know, you want to hold something that is worth more in the future.
That's somewhat unfair because I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry to say, but when a government sits back and says it's not legal tender, and when you get a tax regime that taxes as a capital asset, how can you use it as a payment system when the government discourages it being used as a payment system by the tax regime?
Gladiator, Jeffrey.
So you've used the definition that you've made it impossible for applying it according to the definition you use it for. So that's a very convenient argument.
I mean,
Gladiator Jeffrey, that's the next round. First is opening statement
of the
future.
Mistakes.
Good. Stop. There is a border.
We can talk about you too.
Okay, Danny,
right,
finish your statement.
So now, I mean, I read the blog posts, you know, and most people say, no, I'm holding, I'm not spending it. I'm stupid if I use it. Anyway,
you studied economics.
Jeffrey,
something called Gresham's law. Have you ever heard of Gresham's law?
Yes. Okay.
Jeffrey.
So you can have good money. Bad money forces good money out of circulation. So it doesn't mean it's not money because people are holding it. It means you circulate crappy money, and people are circulating crappy money because they don't want to hold that.
Jeffrey, how do we say silence in New York?
We don't.
I heard something else in Washington. What did you say? How do you say silence in New York?
Fuck you.
You said it.
Please, Danny, close your statement.
So I give you my explanation why it's not used to spend it. Right. One of the reasons is that the price fluctuations are just too high. You know, it went up from November 6,000 to 20,000 in December. Now was back to 9,000. So it's just not a good payment instrument with this volatility. Maybe this will change at one point if you have better infrastructure and so on. But what I think we should really debate is what is a good payment instrument on the blockchain. You know, we will have more and more assets moving to the blockchain. We have securities, collateral, land, and so on. And it makes sense to have money on the blockchain to facilitate transactions. I think it's not going to be Bitcoin for several reasons. One is the volatility. People don't want to do that. B is government. Government will not allow such a decentralized system to be the settlement asset on the blockchain for big transactions. So to me, my interest is now how can we develop safe money on the blockchain that the financial system will be using in a few years.
So cybercurrency have a future, but it will not be Bitcoin.
Yes.
Good.
Exactly.
Michael, opening statement.
Well, the best I can do, and thank you for inviting me here, is actually not say much because most people agree. I thought I'd be in minority here saying fiat will prevail and Bitcoin will be dead. I know I have to be careful about the gentleman in black. But Bitcoin will die. And it will die because Bitcoin is code. Code is not law. And that's the big difference, right? In an organized society, and some of you might be in the anarchy situation, though in Davos they're pretty rare, or they're blocked by police down the road. If it's not law, it is not backed by a centralized government which protects society from trying to have excesses. And we've had excesses in the past. So Bitcoin is dead for another reason. Bitcoin is dead because it's meant to be a global currency, borderless means of exchange. Some people believe it's an alternative store of value. And all disclosure, I trade Bitcoin, by the way. My utility function is to make money for my clients. So I will trade it, but from a long-term perspective, it doesn't make sense because for it to be a global currency, it needs to be scalable. A lot of you might not know the technology behind Bitcoin is poor. It is so poor that the crypto evangelists that support Bitcoin have already forked it, meaning created new babies, better and improved, with the name Bitcoin, when in fact it has nothing to do with the original Bitcoin. And so the technology is poor, it doesn't process quick enough, it uses an enormous amount of energy, which in a sustainable framework is really unsustainable. There are better solutions. My view and my premise is long-live cryptocurrencies. Governments need to get into cryptocurrencies. And we advise certain governments in Europe, and we've worked with some of the large institutions. Even Christine Lagarde, during the World Bank meeting, spoke about a digital-backed SDR, special drawing right, a basket of fiat currencies that digitized. Why is that important? And it's only a small step. It's not independent, it's still centralized, it still has the stamp from governments behind it. It's digitized because it becomes cheaper, quicker, it becomes potentially global and borderless, and it stays within regulation.
So Bitcoin will die because it is not embedded in a legal framework, and technology is poor. Long live cybercurrencies. That's your opening statement. So we have a lot of pressure already on the panel, and I'm afraid that they will jump up and down, and the pressure cooker is rising. Jeffrey, I would like to ask you first to challenge the others, because there is a lot of things cooking inside you. Who would you like to challenge with what?
Well, I only challenged these two, so I haven't challenged his comments yet.
Where do you start?
Where I start. First of the fact is, for me, code is law, and I think I prefer the law embedded in the code than the fuzzy interpretation of the laws that governments have, which are poorly enforced. And every time, when we had the financial crisis, basically every government broke the law in order to do whatever they claimed needed to be done as a force majeure. So the institutions that are most likely to break laws are governments.
So
okay?
Jeffrey, you have to challenge the others.
So the issue that the government has is it got guns and a military, and they can put you in jails according to their interpretation of the law. So, I prefer code, okay? And I prefer code that I can choose voluntarily, okay?
No.
Because that's the whole point.
But you want to share it with everybody else. Okay, your interpretation of code you want to import on everybody else?
But that's the whole point of forking. He says forking is bad. Forking is evolution. If evolution is bad, okay, then I can understand why you think forking is bad.
No longer
it's evolution. So to the extent, whenever you design something with a certain inherent trade-offs in that design.
Jeffrey,
so
who would like to challenge with what? What is the question, the challenge to whom?
All his comments.
Yeah.
Okay, pick one out. Pick one out.
No, I got the challenge.
Oh, you got the challenge.
I can
okay,
answer.
Michael.
Yeah,
if I can answer, I get the challenge.
Michael,
so the issue
defend your stance.
So the issue is about, if I hear it, Bitcoin is wonderful because you don't get a government that keeps its finger on the printing machine and you have inflation. Fair enough, and I grant you there's excess in there. But to tell me that there's an original Bitcoin which a potential of 21 million only should exist, but then hold on a sec, it's too slow, it can't be, it's not really scalable on global, I'm going to fork it, create another one. What's the difference? It's code supply. It is the identical, you are deflating the notion of what you love, which is the original Bitcoin.
The Bitcoin is not being inflated. Those are alternative
deflated
currencies. So with
Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold.
And what's the value of the ecosystem? It's grown.
It's
so
no longer
basically, the purchasing power of all these cryptocurrencies has grown through all these forks. Because you know what, the fork won't work if it has a deflationary impact. Because a fork that had a deflationary impact, since participation in the system is predicated upon the fact that each new innovation will increase value than decrease value. If it decreases value and someone creates an evolution that has harm to the system, then basically nobody will migrate to that new platform because it's all voluntarily. So you can't have an inflation because the rules are designed so that if an innovation creates deflation, that it'll self-correct, which you don't have in your regime. So,
Jeffrey, okay.
So it's easy to set a straw man up where you set something up, an argument, and you prove an argument that's an irrelevant argument to prove, because right now, the only thing that is, if I take a look at, even with all these forks and all these evolution of cryptocurrencies, ultimately what you have right now is the purchasing power of crypto has gone up more, will buy you more than any other alternative thing that you can hold as a store of value.
Okay.
I saw something the other day where he said 10 years ago, if you bought $1,000 of Amazon, it's $12,000 today. If you bought $1,000 of Apple, it's $8,000
If you
today.
bought Bitcoin,
if you bought $1,000 of it's $3,000 today. If you bought $1,000 of Bitcoin, okay, it's $140,000 today.
Gladiator Jeffrey.
If you bought
Now we have
tulips.
short answers to comments. Alexander.
A challenge to you, or an answer to
A challenge to Jeffrey.
or to what you just said. Why the hell do you want to... There are two separate issues in what you said. One is how we measure inflation. Do we have a good measure or a bad measure? That is about the basket of goods that we put in, how we measure the relative prices of the things, and so on. The other thing is, in which currency do we measure it? Now, you're saying that the best measure is in terms of whatever went up most in value. Okay.
Yeah, I don't
and
think
if diamonds had gone up, well, we should have a diamond standard. I mean, this is total nonsense.
I'm not.
Jeffrey, you're challenged. Gladiator, up to stage.
We're talking about which is the best currency, not which is the best standard, or which is the best store of value. So ultimately what I'm sitting back and saying
But your argument for it is that the other things are inflating. Now, this is when you measure the price, you create deflation. Great. The greatest price deflation by your measure we get, which is any of the cryptocurrencies that goes up all the way up, is the best measure.
Well, what I'm saying is people who
it's a red herring.
People who hold. You know, when you think about how you do payments and how you hold and how you look for a store of value, people keep a certain amount of money in a checking account to pay their bills, and then they invest what they have left over because they want to have their purchasing power more in the future. So what I'm saying is the financial system doesn't. The financial system, one is what you have in your checking account. If it's in the checking account 2 days, it's already worth less than it was the day before. Okay, and if you've saved money in the banking system, you also have less money than you have a year from now. So the banking system guarantees that the purchasing power of your money is going to decrease by holding it in that form. So what I'm saying is everybody should be motivated to, whenever they get something coming in whatever form they get it, is to transform it into something that's going to make them wealthier. That should be our objective. Our objective is to hold something and convert it into a form that'll make us poorer, or that the government defines as you like this. No, our objective is to once we get paid something, how much money, what do I need to do to convert? And then what do I need to do to spend? And what do I need to do to have accretion in my wealth? Right now, what I sit back and say is, since Bitcoin has been out, so far, it has significantly outperformed any other alternative as a store of value.
Okay, you guys. You guys.
Alexander?
Please, his recommendation is sell all your stocks, all your bonds, all your deposits, buy Bitcoin because it's the best store of value.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I don't own any stocks. It's a whole fraudulent system.
Jeffrey, Danny, please.
Definitely.
I think.
Thank you for summing up my questions here.
Okay, Danny.
I mean, just to Jeffrey, I think we agree more than he wants to admit. Because he said Bitcoin is a great store of value. He didn't say it's a great transaction payment instrument.
I've been very precise, yes.
And I think that's exactly what we are seeing. I don't care where the value of Bitcoin is. Maybe it will go up more. Probably it will, because more people will buy it around the world. It's a good store of value, a good asset. But we will not use it for transactions. And not for the reasons you said, because it's inconvenient. We can pay with a card very easily, real-time settlement. It doesn't cost us much. Actually, we don't have inflation. In Switzerland, we had slight deflation over the past 10 years. It's a good deal to have a stable currency for transactions. True, yes. So I think there will be coexistence, but there's no reason why we shouldn't use
well, Hayek talked about the denationalization of money. So I don't mind that fiat exists and people making choices. Right. So people are free to make the choices they want to make. But again, going back to a payment system, okay, in the U.S. it can't be a payment system because of its tax regime, because of how it's been defined. So you can't say something doesn't function well as a payment system. There's no incentive to solve the issues associated with cryptocurrencies to convert it to a payment system, because the government has already said, we don't want you to create it as a payment system. So, but the other thing, so it's unfair to say it doesn't function as a payment system. The whole world is trying to create rules to make sure it doesn't function.
So Jeffrey, here we have a question.
So it's evolving to function according to what is most efficient to function for. You know, if all the governments went out and said basically I'm gonna be neutral in taxing Bitcoin as any other currency,
nothing would happen.
Then we'll have to see what happens in payment systems.
Okay,
right now there's no incentive to innovate in Bitcoin to a payment system because there's no incentive to do so.
So no incentive. No incentive to innovate in an unfair system, correct?
It's correct. Exactly.
Yeah, good.
Not to innovate in an unfair system.
No, it's my turn.
Not to innovate in a way that doesn't make any sense to innovate.
Good, perfect.
So,
okay, Michael.
You see, actually, he has a problem with the centralized coordination of rules and laws. It's very difficult to pass on, to let somebody else speak. But I'm going to actually agree with something, and agree with one thing, and principally one thing, is that the code, the notion of decentralization to create trust is a damn good idea. It doesn't mean that certain centralized type decision-making governments are bad ideas. And I guess that's where the difference is. The truth for me, depending what you're addressing, is somewhere in the middle. You can have different systems of trust, centralized or decentralized, operate in parallel. You need an organized society. You need to respect the chairperson when he says it's no longer time to talk, so that we can have a debate. And the issue is that when you get into a debate that is against
not
something...
when the chairperson is not allowing me to interrupt you. Why should I respect the chairperson that doesn't give me the right to interrupt you?
Okay, glad you had a Michael is battling.
That's just a joke.
So I actually do agree that the decentralized concept of creating a trust system is incredible. And I do grant Bitcoin the fact that it has gone absolutely viral. And the reason it's gone up even more than the price of tulips is that the adoption rate in the limited amount has been just incredible. It's one of the first times, actually, that it comes from society, not some intelligentsia at the top. And in fact, large companies and the Congress out is wondering what the hell is going on. Is this for real or not? Because it's originally my son, who was trading Bitcoin in the summer by the swimming pool, going up, making more money than he would as a medical, in his medical profession, going, what is going on? And he starts to ask questions. So the decentralized approach is important. Now the code, why is it happening now? It's happening now because we have two things that happened. And there I do grant Jeff. Our trust system in governments and banks was questioned in 2008. My mother worried that UBS was going down, originally from Switzerland, took her money out and walked over to the state-owned post office and dropped it there. And I was, gee, what do you do with that? The second reason, so there has been, in particular for millennia, an event of absolutely extraordinary proportion where there is a distrust in the existing system. The second reason it exists now and it's gone viral is what you all have in your pockets. It is available. It is easy to access. So a 15-year-old can buy a Bitcoin, but he can't actually trade IBM on the US stock market. So the access is created at viral. It doesn't make it a store of value. It made it a damn good gamble for a while. And afterwards, maybe we can talk about valuation frameworks, why it will continue. And despite the position I'm forced to take in this debate, I think it could actually go higher for a while. But it will disappear over time. Even tulips still exist, but not at the same price.
Okay, very well. I tried to summarize here. Applause for the first round here. So I quickly summarize. Jeffrey, every government breaks the rules all the time. Fiat is dead. Michael, the notion to deflate the thing you love does not make sense. Alexander, let's sell all our assets and buy Bitcoins.
That was my interpretation of his position.
Danny,
You all would be a lot wealthier today if you followed his advice.
Danny, cybercurrency is the future, but it will not be Bitcoin. I would like to open up the floor now. The rules of the games are short question, and the question ends with a question mark. There's no statements, there's no opinions, there is no exclamation mark at the end. Question marks and the short thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very emotional. Ugo, the professor who was labeled by his daughter, my daddy is a nerd. Please.
Okay, so I'll do 1 second statement and then a question.
Oh,
Okay.
he's a nerd. We approve.
Very smart people thought that the gold standard was the best monetary system. The gold standard was introduced in the UK by Sir Isaac Newton, one of the smartest people who ever lived. The gold standard was a disaster. We know that fiat money, every macroeconomist, with almost every sane macroeconomist agrees that fiat currency is better than the gold standard. Now, my question.
Well, then I'm an insane economist.
Macroeconomist, maybe. Do you agree with me that, number one, a key thing that is written in every financial statement is past performance is not guarantee of future performance. Therefore, your statement, Bitcoin did well, so far it will do well forever, it's nonsense. Number two, the first computer I bought in 1985, it had 256K of RAM and 20 mega, a hard drive of 20 mega. So would you value, do you think that the government is crazy to see that a computer that now it has a hard drive, 1 gig, 1 tera of hard drive, and 20 gig of RAM is worth much more than that computer I bought? And that has to do with the fact that we use hedonic prices. It's not cooking of inflation. That's the right way to do. That's what say. A car now is better than a car 20 years ago.
And the question is?
Well,
All the goods. So,
To whom?
So it makes sense. What you said, it's wrong. Do you agree with me?
Gladiator Jeffrey, you're being challenged. Two economists battling here.
I mean, you made a statement and just asked you to do it. I agree with your statement. I disagree with everything you said. So first for you, your assertion on the gold standard is I completely disagree with you. And to sit back and say every economist, that every economist, every macroeconomist. Okay, I got 2 PhDs from the University of Chicago. Okay, I got my first at 21, my second at 22. Okay, so I would say I'm probably a reasonably qualified economist. Okay, I passed my orals at 19 years old. Okay, so I think I have some knowledge.
Okay, Jeffrey, what is the
Hayek
answer
was a
to the
personal friend
challenge?
of mine, so I have some knowledge of economic theory.
The CVs are in the booklet, by the way.
So I have some knowledge of economic theory. So your interpretation of the efficacy of the gold standard, I disagree with. Okay, and I never made the statement that because the last 10 years Bitcoin has outperformed, that it will continue to outperform. What I said is, if you put your money into a bank, you're going to be guaranteed to have a debasement of value. We never got into the discussion of valuation metrics for Bitcoin. Okay, so, and that's a separate discussion, but I never said because it did well for 10 years, it'll continue to go well. But it is a fact that if you put money in a financial institution, a year later, your purchasing power of your money is going to be worth less than it is today. So that's a fact. And if you had the government not backing behind it, it would be even worse, and nobody would have their money in the banks. So I do believe, according to how I value Bitcoin, it has significantly higher to go according to my valuation metric, which could prove to be wrong. But don't misstate or twist my words into being something very different than what I said. And don't assert something as a fact where there's a lot of evidence contrary to that, where I can get a lot of other microeconomists in the room who are also distinguished curriculums that can talk to you from a different perspective about the gold
Let's not twist the words. Maybe there are different interpretations about words. We have Zaga. Who are you challenging with which question?
I'm actually not challenging anyone. It's just a question, really. I'm curious about the demographics that are purchasing Bitcoin and these other cryptocurrencies, and whether this kind of sharp incline into a wealthier status might change the social order that exists at this point. And if that's, again, concentrated in industrialized countries or if it extends globally. And the second thing is the idea of borderless currency. How do you anticipate the social backlash against, the concentration or centralization of power and resources in certain settings or contexts? How do you expect that might affect Bitcoin?
Well,
maybe Dani.
I can take the first one.
Yes.
So you can take the other, because it's easier. I mean, just from the data, we don't know who is buying it, right? Because it's anonymous. But there have been some surveys of who is holding Bitcoins. And in a way, what is not surprising is the biggest group is the millennials. And then, but you have like in the teenagers, you have it's a sizable group. But then it goes really up through all the age cohorts.
That's why they're getting wealthy.
Up to us, basically, right? So it's really the whole population is holding Bitcoins. And that's also remarkable, I think.
What do you think the
in
net
9
worth
years,
of millennials would be if they weren't holding Bitcoin and they had their money in the bank today? So think about how much empowerment, when you talk about social structure, think about how much we're empowering millennials, because now they've been able to invest in an alternative to what the government forces them to invest in, and how much wealth they've been accreted for that, and think about how much economic power is now that they can now have, and how that's going to transform the fact that now when they're a significant participant in the allocation of capital in the world. Before they were an insignificant contributor to the allocation of capital in the world.
Okay.
So I think this is a very, very important wealth transfer away into a millennial class that I think is having great consequences, because if you look at all these ecosystems being designed, you're seeing a lot of people trying to come up with decentralized cooperative systems. And it's really amazing what's going on if you look at all the evolution of the different types of cryptos and some of the problems they're trying to solve in this space that they would have no ability to solve because they had no economic power in the past if they were doing exactly what everybody else here would have had them done in the absence of people like me.
Perfect. Michael.
So on the issues who's holding, I think millennials are holding. Predominantly, that's where it's coming from. The large institutions that we talk to are asking us questions. So we're talking about some of the largest state funds in the world, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds even, looking at it. They're asking questions, doing nothing at the moment. And they're doing nothing because the market is too small, the liquidity is poor, and the governance is virtually in existence, and there's no custody. In fact, if you buy $10 million worth of Bitcoin, you hold it on something that looks like a keyring that you have to lock up somewhere. It's complicated. It's not simple. Millennials are making money, and millennials are buying it, and they're doing that because they're doing that because it has gone up, and there's a FOMO, fear of missing out. Oh, this guy has bought and made a ton of money doing this, so I'll buy it without understanding it. 99% of the millennials do not understand. They are gambling. And gambling is fine or not fine, that's a different discussion, but that's what they're doing. There will be an issue with them piling in to this, but on the digital asset side, there are some ramifications which are very important on the social side, which we haven't really spoken about. The second part is long-lived cryptocurrencies, in particular in the developing world where there's a distrust in the banking system for real, dictatorships, distrust in government, enormous amount of corruption, where there is a penetration of smartphones now, there is evidence that it is a store of value, that the digitization of something, in fact, it started in some countries as telephone minutes as being the exchange that's going on. You move on from that, from maybe Bitcoin for some. If you have no alternative, it's definitely, if you're fleeing Syria, it's definitely easier to store your wealth in Bitcoin than to carry gold. I'll grant that. But that's when you have no alternative. From a security standpoint, long-term investment standpoint, you need to think, what is the essence of the value that you're investing in?
The essence of the value, Alexander.
Just a side comment on this question of who holds it. Somebody noted that the day after Thanksgiving, 230,000 new accounts were opened in Coinbase. And the hypothesis is that the millennials and people around Turkey started talking, that was a conversation of the day, Bitcoin. And the effect of that was partly to get a rush into Bitcoin, because that was the flavor of the day, and because it was considered, for many reasons that we've heard, an investment.
Well, I have to respond. One is almost all, if you look at the money management business, most money management business is momentum investing.
No.
Okay, so that's most of the money management business. You can break that, that's what all these algorithmic models are. A significant part of them are momentum models. Not everyone, but there's a huge percentage who allocate capital. The government before was enabling people to flip homes over and over again, right? We had a housing bubble, and nobody was sitting back and saying, we have a housing bubble, let's kill the banks, let's stop lending people to mortgages, it's horrible. No, this is the only bubble they seem to talk about, is if Bitcoin is a bubble. So it's the things that they have no participation in and that they don't control are the ones that they don't like how the increase in prices. If it's something that's embedded in their ecosystem, they're not going to sit back and say, gee, Amazon went from this to that. It's horrible. It's dangerous that people buy Amazon stock. It's dangerous that people buy Facebook. It's dangerous that people buy Google. They'll never say that about a stock. All they'll talk about it is this. So Jeffrey, and these are people who never recognized any bubble.
You see, he's battling for votes. He's battling for votes because we need to increase the votes.
They enable bubbles.
They enable bubbles.
They don't recognize them. They enable them.
A further question. Applause to Jeffrey. One more, and we come to the closing votes. I take yes, please, with a green tie, green for the future. What is the future?
How does a millennial feel who bought at 20,000 and now it's at 10? That's one question. Second question is it the utility function of Bitcoin that makes it important and interesting, or is it an asset class? And if it is an asset class, why don't we then think that it went up simply because of the abundant liquidity that governments pushed into the market and it moved up like any other asset class?
I'm sure.
Michael, maybe, yes?
Just on the asset class issue, because I deal with that and I've dealt with that my whole life. Most people don't even consider fiat currencies to be an asset class because it's a relative game, right? You buy one currency, you have to sell another. It's a relative game, and there's no reason in the purest form that one currency in a perfect world should outperform another over the very, very long term. So a currency, a separate asset class that I define it, and by the way, we don't trade on technical, but we trade on fundamentals, and I think most people in the stock market still today are valuation driven rather than just price followers. The framework that you're looking at is absolutely clear that it can't, from a technical standpoint, just continue. There needs to be a continuous continuum, and at one point it will just stop.
Good.
Verify, though, that you open your remarks to say that you actually traded for your clients? I mean, and
No, I didn't say for our clients. I said we traded, and we have a group of traders inside who are experienced in trade. And the reason is it was driven by our clients that are much too large for the... We manage 20 billion and 22 clients only. So we'll trade cryptocurrencies in general, not just Bitcoin. And we trade it on a very short term, not necessarily a long term. We believe it's going to outperform everything else. We believe in blockchain. We believe in a lot of growth venture capital companies that are using a decentralized model to disrupt certain existing systems. And so long as it disrupts and it disintermediates, that's the second area we like. And we think there's value in some of the business models that are being applied. But I do agree with Jeff, there's a lot of work to be done. Some of the areas we prefer is in the protocol itself. And there soon will be a blockchain 2.0 that's looking at a very, very 50,000 times faster way, a hash graph, if you're into that, looking at a way to make things really scalable. I think when you get into that zone, it then can become global and borderless and really scalable. So the technology is great.
Alexander?
I just one remark or question for the panel. The title of this session is Bitcoin is dead, long live cryptocurrencies. Shouldn't it be Bitcoin is dead, long live blockchain or distributed ledger technologies?
Could be the debate for the next next debate, peak debate. That would be interesting. I would like to conclude the debate. I conclude again from Jeffrey's side. Bitcoin is the future. Fiat is dead. Alexander, Bitcoin is not a currency. Danny, cybercurrency is the future, but it will not be Bitcoin. Michael, Bitcoin will die because it is not embedded in a legal framework and technology is poor. Long live cybercurrencies. Now we come to the closing vote. Were they able to sway your vote a little bit more to one or the other side? The outcome was 9-1. I repeat the question. Bitcoin, will it be the leading global borderless currency in 10 years' time? Hands up. Jeffrey, what happened with all your argumentation, gladiator? Make one more statement maybe to sway your vote. I grant this to you.
Well, I obviously didn't convince anyone, so...
Speechless. Okay, who believes Bitcoin will it be the leading global borderless currency in 10 years' time? No.
Other cryptocurrencies.
Oh, yeah. 9-1. Jeffrey, what happened? You were the fiercest gladiator. How do we say in New York?
Well, the positive thing from this debate was that many people said not Bitcoin, but other cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
What nobody said is fiat. Okay. So at the end of the day, if Bitcoin is not the dominant, okay, I'm happy if another cryptocurrency comes along. The whole point here is there's a commitment to the crypto space. So for me, that's the most important. Now I understand the point of view why sending people here like other cryptocurrencies, because the framework is still very centralized. So the paradigm shift for many people in this room is very, very difficult. So I can understand that there's a very difficult paradigm shift. What I am confident of is that the people who raised their hand along with me are going to be wealthier 10 years from now than the people who didn't raise their hand. Okay? So,
Jeffrey, the money maker. Before we conclude this, I would like to announce, to address Bitcoin, the inefficiency in energy use, we are launching an award just after this panel here, which will be substantially vested in dollar terms. So please stay on. After that, the floor is open downstairs for drinks and food. But first, I would like to thank the 4 gladiators that came from all across the world to debate and sway your votes, successfully or not, is not my, that's your vote. We have Michael from London, an applause. Danny from Washington, D.C. Gladiator Jeffrey. Trust is the key. Alexander from Geneva. Thank you so much.